And all the people that work online and all the things that work online are people who are coming from a very authentic emotional experience because we watch them and we think, oh, we could learn from that. We can learn from the fact that they messed it all up massively and then I don't know, I think we have to really keep our eye on projects which remind us of what the human experience is.
So welcome to Who's Elvis Round Here. This is a podcast where I get to meet extraordinary people who are leaders in their own fields and they know how to release the brilliance of their people. And I'm delighted that this week I'm talking to a good friend of mine, Fiamma Montagu. Welcome to the podcast. Explain who you are, please.
Hi. I'm Fiamma Montagu and I'm an arts producer and an artist. And I've worked as a documentary maker, development producer for many years after university. So I've done quite a lot of different things. And as I was going through it, I was thinking I've done a lot of projects which are pretty maverick and pretty out there in terms of realms of possibility, which I hadn't quite realised how much that's the case. But as a documentary maker, I initiated the Space Jump project, which is literally obviously someone taking a balloon up to high altitude and jumping in out. And I've worked with mammoth hunters in Siberia looking for mammoths because we were going to extract the DNA and make a documentary about that. And so I've done all about the realms of human possibility and what we're capable of.
Wow.
So one of those projects which you wanted me to sort of talk about was the poppy installation at the Tower of London in 2014, which was really extraordinary as a project to work on, and a great example of how these projects just sort of appear because I got a phone call out of the blue saying, we've got this extraordinary project. It's at the Tower of London. It's going to be 246,000 ceramic poppies, one to commemorate every single person that died in the Great War. And the project's run into difficulties and you've got to get in a car and get up to Derby and talk to the artists and work something out. So I was thrilled because I'd already heard about this project. It had already been in the newspapers. And I thought, this is fantastic. And what they were basically saying is, the Queen's coming in 3 weeks. We've got 100,000 poppies in the moat. We're supposed to have 800,000. We are really up against it.
And she can count. She's going to know the difference.
Well, I mean, they'd done that thing, which is to start a project in terms of its imaginative capacity, but, they hadn't kind of worked through what was required in lots and lots of ways. Anyway, the point of the story is that I went up, met Paul, whose idea it was, in Derby. He'd actually cut 2 fingers off by electrifying the rollers. Yeah, he has since talked about this. And he had this brilliant idea, which was to commemorate the dead and commemorate the sacrifice that had been made. And like a lot of artists, he had this brilliant vision, but what he hadn't worked through was the sort of production side of it and what was going to be involved. But what was incredible about this project was how much invention happened as we went along. And people always sort of glide over because you want a project to look like it was perfect. But actually there was a lot of behind the scenes trying to work out how we were going to resolve things, bringing new people on board. I mean, for just one little example, there was no plans for the fact that the poppies were going to arrive in installments. So the fact is that we were behind by 4 months. So the reason the installation grew over time and had that beautiful sense of it growing over time is simply because we couldn't provide the poppies quick enough and we had to grow the whole thing. But what that led to was this idea of the sea of blood and the fact that soldiers, it gave a much more poignant reading to the project, because what happened was we reacted imaginatively to the problem, and as a result of that, Tom Piper was brought on board for the staging, and Paul had to kind of think about how they were going to think about it in a completely different way. And that happened throughout the project. There were just many, many times, and we had very different people on the project. We had the head of logistics for the army. We had 6 charities. We had all the pomp and circumstance and hierarchy associated with the royal family and the necessity to follow protocol. We had the British public. So there was no sense of how we were going to sell them at the beginning or how that would work. Well, there was a sense that we were going to sell the poppies, but there was no sense about what the take-up might be.
Yeah,
so it was
of
all
course.
about how do we create a momentum? How do we create excitement about this? How do we create inclusion? And again, that happened over time because there was no plan for how the poppies were going to be installed. So we then had to build teams of people to install the poppies and to be part of that. So 16,000 people are involved in.
Wow. The
Yeah.
scale of it's mind-blowing, really. I mean,
Oh.
number one, incredibly complicated, huge scale, so many different people and organizations involved to make it come to fruition. I mean, do you see plans in your head on how you make this happen, or do you just come against each barrier each time and just solve it as you go? How does it work for you? How do you make something like that work?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be the first to say I didn't make it work. I did the bit which was I did the slightly terrifying side, which because I had background in ceramics, which was how are we going to get 600,000 of these made when we're only making them at a certain rate per week, and this comes down to the sort of values and the intentions, because it was very clear that this was a project that if you could get belief behind it, if you could get the sense of sort of war spirit and that we were all pulling together, you would be able to get people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. So in this case, it meant going to Stoke-on-Trent and persuading a factory to retool entirely their tiling process so that we could literally get to 40,000 ceramic poppies a week. And they all had to be individually made, which meant recruiting teams of people to do that. But because there was a spirit behind it, there was this belief, we are doing this for the right reasons, it was much easier to convince people about how they were going to go about and do it.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, producing pizzas on a line is very different to doing what you were doing, which was obviously very evocative emotionally. It was marking an incredible event. So actually, it's the belief in it that you think made the difference in getting what was actually almost an impossible task to actually happen.
Yeah, I think the belief is always, and it was what I was going to talk to you about today, belief and values, and the why of any project like this, which is, and Paul's sort of very interesting person, and I think he had this great vision, but there was so many people who came on board from different with different skill sets, very different skill sets, to make it happen, but also enormous conflicts behind the scenes, because obviously everyone's coming from very different positions. So they're like, well, why can't we I don't know, put masses of advertising all over the boxes when we send them out to people? And it's because we've got to strip it down and we've got to keep it so that it's about soldiers. So everyone ended up coming to the same position, but there was a lot of difference in terms of how everyone approached it at the time. Yeah.
But actually to do something that complicated with that many different stakeholders and groups of people who are interested in it, the pure vision, I guess, is one of the things that makes that happen. Because actually, if you're all aligned behind, this is why we're doing it, this is what will happen when it's working beautifully and the way it's going to impact people's lives, then you can corral people more easily. If you didn't have that singular vision, I guess it would become even more difficult.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There's a lot. That's right. There were soldiers breaking down because it was a way to grieve. There was an emotional sincerity to the project that was really important throughout. But, you know, there were a lot of issues with public and private, and
Sure.
making sure that people felt that they could participate in it fully meant that when it came to taking the project down, for example, everybody said, we don't want to take it down. It's got to stay up. And the politicians all got involved at that
Yeah.
point. And then again, there was creative problem solving there, because it was, okay, well, why don't we make it even more democratic? Why don't we get it to tour the country now? Why is it just London focused? So that was an idea I formulated at the time, it again, in response to this issue, which was, we've got to take it all down, and people didn't want it down. It was in the papers every day. So it's kind of like, I'm just talking about the bits I did. The fact of the matter is that there were a lot of people involved, and everybody was talking about all the different aspects all the time. So everybody.
Yeah. But I think when you've got a project that's that exciting, that visual, that emotive, and you've got to hit all these different roadblocks as you go, because actually there are so many people involved, and you're up against it on deadlines, etc. But what I like about it is, as you kind of learnt and you built momentum off it, you were adapting as you went, because actually it wasn't a kind of one and done. It was constantly developing as you were going through it. And actually you had no idea, what the reaction was going to be like. And, if people wanted to buy them or not. And like the fact that people said, you can't take it down, please keep it up. That's a bit of a surprise, I guess, because you thought it was going to be like any exhibition, when there's a date and it's over and then we move on. So you got to kind of flex with it as you kind of learn and grow, I guess. But that's one of the beauty of art, isn't it? You don't know how people will react until it's there.
You don't know how people are going to react until it's there. But this is, I think, what's unusual about this project, and this is why I'm talking about this particular one, is it highlights a lot of things, that a lot of directions in which I think people want to go now, in the sense that I think people really mind about authenticity of, where's a project coming from? Why are we doing it? What are the values inherent in that project? Where are we coming from? And you have to think about that quite carefully. I mean, that's true of all these projects. I mean, because it's about showing human endeavor and what you're capable of. So you want to inspire people, and I think people are really aware of things. I mean, there's a girl who came yesterday who's trying to get personhood for the rivers. And she's a young girl, and she's doing a pilgrimage across England to try and get, I don't know, special status for rivers in this country. And I think people need to have that sense of, this is coming from a certain place. And that's what I think is interesting, when you can draw that out of your team. You can get people to kind of come behind that. It's just really powerful, it makes a big difference. And you can create movement like that. And time is another factor, that if something goes on, then you can record it as it's changing in time.
Yeah. Which in this particular case, it did very much so. So that there's quite an evolution from the starting idea to actually what was delivered, because it kind of grew its own wings over time, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, all good projects, if you can show how someone's evolved, we're geared up for this. This is why I don't think AI is going AI is good as a tool, but fundamentally we need it to be coming out of human spirit. It has to come from somewhere. My friend's just put in a whole batch of letters into an AI machine, so she can ask the AI machine what that person felt at a given moment in their lives, all the letters they wrote in their life. The problem with that is that we're all people that exist in time. So the idea that you could ask a machine an answer to a question that's going to be relevant, if you don't know where that machine is coming from, a person, whether you can kind of get a sense of where they're coming. And all the people that work online, and all the things that work online, are people who are coming from a very authentic emotional experience, because we watch them and we think, oh, we could learn from that. You know, we can learn from the fact that they messed it all up massively, and then I don't know, I think we have to really keep our eye on projects which remind us of what the human experience is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. And actually, I love the way you're articulating it. It's understanding the origin of things. And then I guess, one of the things that, we're fascinated by here is, how do you get the best out of people in any endeavor? And actually, my sense would be that origin thing is vital, but then it's, how do other people personally connect with that origin in a way that's meaningful for them? And I guess all of those connections are very different depending on who the individual is and the context of their lives and what makes them show up. And I suppose giving them a chance to explore that and make a deeper connection just gets more energy happening. There's more chance that they will pull into that project and make amazing things happen.
Yeah, and also it's this human connection. If you read a soundbite about something about transgender, for example, which I know is a subject that you care deeply about, is it going to have the same impact as if you watch someone's journey through that experience with all the aspects of what they learn through that journey, and how difficult it is, and how everything it means? If you just, we've got to keep that in place. We've got to keep that emotional connection with the person that we're relating to in all projects. Because if we try and get other people to write these things for us and they're not coming from a human experience, I'm like a little bit concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that. I totally agree. And I think in the world in which we now live, it's very easy to be so transactional about information, about what's going on in the world. You talk about, getting sound bites. That's how we consume stuff all the time. But what we're missing, we're getting this breadth that we would never have got before, which is amazing. And we should never say we should turn back the clock on that. But we shouldn't do that at the cost of the depth of connection that you're talking about, where you experience the journey, you understand where things come from, you understand why these imperfections of projects actually is what makes them brilliant at the end of it, because you've seen where they've come from. And I think, a lot of people are struggling with, how do you still get all this amazing stimulus and the breadth whilst the depth is being properly lived? And it's a challenge I see in families. I see this challenge at work. It's all about kind of volume of stuff, rather than necessarily just doing one thing really beautifully, which seems harder and harder for a lot of people to grasp. And of course, you do things beautifully, really well. I mean, I'm looking at behind you. That's one of your pieces, right? Where that you've made, and I have something rather similar in my garden, which I absolutely love. I see it every day. Being able to create the time and the focus for something to then live on with an energy is, I think, what we're missing, a lot of people in their lives. So how do you make sure that you keep that time, that focus, to be able to produce things that live on and touch people in meaningful ways? Because you do it for a living.
Yeah, I do it for a living. Well, I mean, at the moment, I think every artist has got that conundrum, and there are many, many pages of artists sort of, concerned about whether their work is good or relevant or speaks to. But I mean, for me, the main thing at the moment is, I suppose, I just feel that there are certain things. I mean, I'm working on a pilgrimage project at the moment because I'm really interested in the idea. Again, it's this momentum. Is how do you create a sense of unity between people? How do you create? So in this pilgrimage project, they would bring a piece to a site, each person, and then they would build something together, so that when they got to the site, there would be something that they could thread something onto, and it would be co-created when they arrive. Because I don't know, I just think right now people really need this idea that they are dissimilar, but humankind is of one. They need people. Another project. I mean, I want religious leaders to stand up and kind of like together on plinths and to hug each other, which is pretty basic. But I want that. I want people to have a feeling of emotional connection in terms of how they're relating to each other and how they relate to each other, so that they can see that they're all part of something that's shared. Yeah. So that's where you can get momentum, and that's where you can get lots of people participating in projects together.
I just listening to you talk, what strikes me is often when I'm working with leaders, and admittedly they're in a different world to you, their priorities are nearly always commercial first. It's always about shareholder returns, quarterly earnings reports, etc., etc. Where you seem to start from the way you're describing things is something that fascinates me. It's something I'm motivated by. It's something I think we need more of. And it tends to be those things that you are obsessing about and actually putting energy in without ever worrying about the commercial. The commercial comes afterwards, is how it seems to me. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair. I think it's fair when I'm talking about ideas, but I think you've got to then marry. You can marry the two,
Sure.
You can put them together, but if you come from a place of heart, you're good. I mean, if you come from, I think you can have I think in the end, the Poppy installation was a very successful financial project, which managed to have both the private side of it and the public side kind of connected. You can't be completely, but I think a lot of companies would gain a lot by starting with, what are people going to really look up to us about if we initiate something in this area? And then they can work backwards and go, okay, well, maybe we can do some sort of, we can publicize it, we can do some marketing project from it, we can do that. But let's start with something really interesting that is going to capture people's imagination, that people are going to think, oh, thank God they did that. We've all been thinking, why don't we get as many religious leaders as we can stand up next to each other and literally just hug each other? I mean, it sounds so naive. No, but it's visually. Why are we not showing visually what we want to see in the world?
I get it. I get it, and it's got some energy about it. And by the way, I'm not naive enough to think that commercial isn't important. We need commercial, otherwise the world doesn't spin. It's the starting point, and I think the starting point when I hear you describe ideas is always the energy of the idea, and then afterwards you can overlay the commercials. But I think when you start with the commercials, you often end up with something pretty magnolia, in my experience. And if you've got a powerful enough idea, there's always something you can spin it on, right? So religious leaders hugging on plinths, I'm in.
Yeah, because, I mean...
It's what we want. It's what we want in the world.
Isn't it? What message are we sending the world? What are we telling our children? I mean, what is it all about at the end of the day? And you can create art projects that work, well alongside, Nike's next campaign, or you can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's just, we're living in a really, a time which could become very cynical.
Very easily.
And it's quite important that people are optimistic, and, they're shown, I think the kids in particular, they're shown examples of things that they can do that, that they can get on board with. Like someone doing a pilgrimage through great national parkland to help, be part of nature and intrinsically involved in nature, or someone who's trying to get a bill of rights for rivers across the UK. Yeah. It's stuff I'm motivated by anyway.
No, I hear it. I hear it loud and clear. And there's lots of things in our conversation I could unpick that I've really enjoyed. The kind of the whole origin, the authenticity, the vision of values, having this belief, all of that. But what I just love is, and listening to you talk is, this is one of the reasons I love you, Fiamma, because when you talk about things you're excited about, your whole eyes light up. There's a thing about you that makes me go, well, it has to happen, because with that energy, you're going to do it. And it might not be the first vision of what you say, because things evolve over time. But, when you get an idea that connects with you in such a meaningful way, you'll do something with it, And actually, we just need more of that, I think, on this planet right now. More people who say, this is what I believe in. This is what I want, the kids to be thinking and feeling, and therefore I will make that happen. And that's why we need more art. We need more people believing in having an impact that isn't just the usual business stuff, but it's stuff that touches people's lives. So look, I've loved talking to you. I'm really glad you came. Thank you for all the insights you shared. I'm a huge fan, obviously, of you and your work, and it's just great to hear some of those learnings that you picked up over the years. So thank you, and hopefully I'll be seeing some of your new projects come to fruition soon, including spiritual leaders hugging on podiums.